Hello, everyone. This is Lorena Patterson. I am the president and CEO of WaterPower Canada. I'm very pleased to be joined today by Soula Chronopoulos, who is the president of AquaAction. And she's going to tell us a little bit more about that organization. They're trying to fill a gap between innovations that have to do with water and the funding and the commercialization that has to take place in order to bring these things to market. So it's going to be a very interesting conversation today. I'd like to thank all of you for joining us. As you know, Water Power Canada is an organization of primarily hydropower companies that provide services and equipment, as well as produce hydroelectric power across the country. We're comprised mostly of crown corporations, private companies, and lots of engineering contractors as well. And we have close linkages to universities and academia. So this is a great space to have this conversation about what AquaAction is doing. And I'd like to thank Soula for joining us today. So Soula, if you would like to introduce yourself and AquaAction, and then we've got some questions.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
one reminder before we get started, there is a Q&A function that you'll see at the bottom of your screen that you can use to send in your questions. And if you're interested in seeing closed caption in other languages, you can use that function as well. If you toggle at the bottom of the screen, you should be able to see those functions. So thanks again, Soula, and over to you.
Thank you so much. My name is Soula Chronopoulos, president of AquaAction. I head up a wonderful organization. We've been around for about 10 years. And as a charity, we've launched over 120 water tech companies to date across Canada and across the Great Lakes. And what we are doing is we are building a water secure future. And part of that water security is energy. And so I'm very happy to be here today, Lorena, to talk about this because this is a very important sector. And water underpins everything we do, drives 60% of our global economy, and a large part of that is energy. So very much looking forward to presenting and just talking a little bit about our work today.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So with that, I think we're ready to bring up the presentation.
Absolutely.
Sorry, just, yeah, there we go.
There we go. So today we're going to talk a little bit about the water impact reports, which is a new standard that we're very happy to announce today that we've launched in Canada with a wonderful partner who's online today. But, water runs through everything. And because water runs through everything, we don't value it. We value diamonds more than we do something that actually gives us life for 3 days if we don't have it. So I want to talk a little bit about that, and we can go to the next slide. And just look at water for what it is. So the pressure we're facing today on fresh water is actually an economic crisis. And it impacts, obviously, agriculture. It impacts our industrial operations. It makes our manufacturing, our production, our agriculture, our food security, our energy security run. And as many of you in the audience know, over the last year, we've seen a lot of the hydro companies across Canada produce less energy, thus less revenue. So we're feeling the impacts of, what happens when water is not as abundant as we'd like it to be. And it also impacts residential and infrastructure. I mean, we've seen in Alberta that, they can't build any more housing because they don't have enough groundwater. And finally, the environment. So water, in our minds, is much more than just an environmental issue. It's across the board. And you can't manage what you can't measure. And today, around the world, there are over 2 billion people without stable access to fresh water. And by 2030, we're seeing that number fluctuate between 40 and 50%. You are at the core of that as the folks that are providing that energy. And we're going to see the impacts of that very shortly. So in Canada, communities, ecosystems, and industries are increasingly feeling the strain. And improving the way we manage our fresh water is one of the defining challenges of the 21st century. Last 50 years has been about oil. The next 50 years will actually be about water. And so millions have already been displaced from exhausted freshwater basins, and North America is not immune. We can go to the next slide. So what we do at AquaAction is we build a water secure future. We are a charity. We create an innovation pipeline where we're solving issues for water. So this is not an open ideation group. We are basically going into the Great Lakes and across Canada on our transnational border waters, and we're looking at what are the biggest issues. And a lot of the times it's managing that water, restoring that water, stopping the pollution of it, microplastics and PFAS that we're seeing. But more and more increasingly right now, because of the increasing droughts that we're seeing out west, it's more about agriculture too. And so we speak, we're empowering innovators, we're strengthening cross-border collaboration. We talk a lot about youth, right, when we're talking about the startup ecosystem. But I can tell you that 50% of the innovators in our organization are not youth. Some of them are grandparents. And you can say that's crazy. But where do you go if you have a great idea as an organization and you want to make a difference? Well, we're an open umbrella, and this is where everybody can come. So what distinguishes us from your average venture capital firm is, first of all, we don't take equity, and we are building a community and a new economic force in Canada. And without hiding it, I'm sure we've all seen in the news that water is very much on the agenda geopolitically right now, and that's because it drives agriculture, manufacturing, and energy. And so water is becoming something that's much more than just an environmental issue, as I mentioned earlier. It's actually going to be something we're probably going to be tussling over a lot more of the next little while. So we can go to the next slide. So some of the work that we do, our impact, just very quickly. In the last 10 years, we've launched over 120 companies. And these companies we place them into the community. So we put them in hydroelectric companies, we put them in municipalities, we put them in industries. So they're doing things like brewing more beer with less water. They are growing more food with less water. They are restoring our treatment plants. And so one example I can give you is after the Jasper fire, our stormwater corridors became full of soot. So how do you prevent clogging at our treatment centers? Well, we have technologies right now that are actually cleaning up that soot before it gets to the treatment centers and overwhelms them. So that's the kind of work. It's quiet work, it's important work, but it basically is also profitable work. So these companies collectively are generating over $200 million of revenue a year. So there's nothing wrong with building a new economy where we're doing good for the planet, but also putting food on the table. And that is what the work we do is all about. You can go to the next slide. Just very quickly, we work across many different industry sectors, just so you can see: municipal, environment, ag tech, construction, food and beverage, aquaculture, manufacturing, and it's growing. And interestingly enough, some of the things that we are actually seeing is some of these companies are coming to us because they're feeling the impact of that water on their industries. I want to give you an example in the energy sector. We have one company, and they're called Drone des Champs. And they just finished one of our commercialization programs. And what they do is they monitor water in riverbanks by customized drone units. And they have a big contract right now with Hydro-Quebec to do that work. So there's an example of a technology that's helping on the monitoring side, helping Hydro-Quebec manage those water and those water flows. So Canada's water tech sector is emerging as one of the fastest growing blue economy ecosystems globally, and it's poised to tap into a $1 trillion industry by many accounts over the next few years. So we can go to the next slide. Very quickly, the programs we run. The Aqua Hacking program is our flagship program. That is the biggest producer of innovations in Canada. It feeds all of the incubation ecosystem. So we have thousands of innovators that have come through. They go into the local incubators, they come out with an MVP, and then we take them into a program called Aqua Entrepreneur. And that is really us not having this notion of cohorts, but more a notion of, all right, when you're ready, we're taking you to market. And the markets that we do open primarily are public works. And once we get one of these organizations in a public works company, that's a gold card for them. And what we're seeing is an incredible increase in this economy in Canada, to the point that the government has recognized this. And the newest government has actually put $100 million water tech security fund in place, or has promised one. And we're trying to hold them to account because that kind of funding is going to start to go a long way to compete with, for example, the United States that is taking a lot of our innovators down south. So we're trying to strengthen the sovereignty of Canada through this kind of work by putting more of them into the market. And just to show you, this March, I think our last assessment on a 3-year program that we have with Aqua Entrepreneur has placed over 230 pilots and contracts in these municipalities and public works, making a difference and creating jobs. We've created over 400 jobs in the last year. And so that's kind of work that we do. And then finally, AquaNation is basically where they all come to continue to thrive. And so not only across Canada, but we're seeing this also across the Great Lakes. They're coming into our community and they're all working together because I think that these folks see things a little bit differently than most startups. They're actually seeing the urgency of the water and the water crisis that we're facing. And finally, there's an eco-literacy program we've just launched. This one is very exciting. We've launched it with the ECCC, with the Canada Water Agency, and now we're partnered with the Royal Canadian Geographic Society, because what we found is that 20% of Canadians don't even know, 50% of Canadians actually, is that don't know where their water that comes through their tap comes from. So you're doing all this amazing work, but on the other side, the public doesn't really know where our water comes from. And 20% have not even heard that there is a water crisis, for example. But going back to that ticker tape parade example that I shared, what we're trying to do is that we've taken a different approach to this eco-literacy program that's nationwide, and we want to start inspiring kids in kindergarten. Because in kindergarten, they're also the biggest influencers. And if they can start seeing themselves in careers in water, then we're going to create a whole new generation of amazing stewards and talent in Canada. So we can go to the next slide, but that's a little bit about the work we do. And now let me just dive right into these wonderful impact reports. One of the things, I'm a researcher myself, so I remember when I joined this organization a few years back and we had all these wonderful technologies. First question I asked is, what is the impact on the environment? And, everyone will tell me, oh, we save this much water and we do this much good, but of course I didn't believe. So we found this incredible partner in Montreal, and I want to give a shout out to Emmanuelle Tavernier, who's actually on the call with us. She's the brilliant mind behind Oxia Initiative, and they do a lot of work in the carbon measurement arena. And so together, she worked through with us, how can we create an avoided water use impact report based on ISO, which is International Standard Organization standards. So we wanted to create a gold standard in measuring impact on water. And so once we developed this evaluation platform that is, launching right now, and we're very happy about it, we started putting our entrepreneurs through it. And what we found is that some of these entrepreneurs weren't saving money, because when we considered their manufacturing process, we considered their supply chains, actually they had a negative effect. And so what this has allowed us to do is to help standardize what impact is, measure it, and eventually down the line, we want to put a value on water because we see a water credit market coming. And I think this is going to be important to the energy sector and some of the work that we're doing, because on the other hand, we're also talking to the financial sector, and we're trying to see whether we can develop some financial tools to create more capital around this. So this is a very exciting standard. It's Canadian made, it's born in Canada, and we want to see it go nationwide. But that was the impetus of this. Now we can measure apples to apples. So we can go to the next slide. So how does it work? Basically, we run our entrepreneurs through these water scope online assessments that have been developed by our partner Oxia. They are based upon the standard, as I told you, ISO 14046 to be quite specific. And these ISO standards are the same standards that are used for measuring carbon footprint. Now, carbon management is a multi-billion-dollar industry. So measuring these companies' water footprint has a similar potential as water scarcity is increasing. And in fact, what we think is going to end up happening is, as we measure the impact of these technologies, the further west that we go, and the further the country gets drier and drier, the more value this water is going to have. So that's how it works right now. You can go to the next slide. And what the assessment looks at is that we look at the full life cycle of the technology and its application. So that includes how it's manufactured, how it's transported, etc. And then we measure that solution against the baseline scenario of water usage. For example, how much water does it take to grow a head of lettuce? And how much water does it take to grow that head of lettuce that is managed by this or impacted by this technology? And we were pleasantly surprised to find how incredibly impactful these technologies are. Because some of them, one of them, in fact, is saving over 38,000 Olympic-sized pools of water, which is the equivalent of 95 billion liters of water. Now you're going to say, okay, we're surrounded by water, but we're surrounded by water, but only 1% of that is functional. Only 1% is what we can drink, and only 1% of that 1%, 70% is used in agriculture, for example. So this makes a big difference. And so that is how we were able to really assess each impact and the number of pools of water that they're saving, which was really phenomenal. We can go to the next slide. There are many benefits that for these water tech companies to have these kind of reports. First, it gives them credible, verifiable third-party reporting on sustainability of their technologies, and it creates a universal tool to measure water savings, backstopped by ISO standards. So this can be the basis for so much more. Like I said, the water credit market down the line, or other kind of specialized investment assessments such as blue bonds. And that's an actual real discussion we're having right now in Canada. We can go to the next slide. So I'm trying to get to the slides, Lorena, so we can get to our questions. So some interesting examples. I just wanted to pull out a few here to show you. Smart Green is an AI-powered irrigation system to manage water use in drought-impacted regions. So Smart Green does a lot of work on the West Coast, does a lot of work in arid areas all over the globe. And right now, their technology is saving the equivalent of 141 Olympic-sized swimming pools of water to grow things like lettuce. And so this is more precision agriculture where it measures exactly how much water that plant needs and provides it just that much water and nutrients to grow. So this is a way that we can manage the water better. Second example is one of my favorites, Brewsonic. Brewsonic accelerates dry hopping of beer by up to 5 times and reduces water usage by up to 30%. So basically, they're saving the equivalent of 256 Olympic-sized pools of water when they're brewing their beer. I think that's pretty good. So they found a new way to brew beer with a lot less water. And finally, Plantiva. Here's an interesting one. They develop high-quality seedlings for vertical farms, and they maximize growing space by reducing water consumption. But what we found when we measured their impact is that they save the equivalent of 135 Olympic-sized swimming pools of water. And each swimming pool of water is 125 million liters. So that's a lot of water that we're saving. And they recently, let me give you some success stories. Plantiva did a massive pilot in Quebec, in a large farming industry in Quebec, and they are now been picked up by California, who is basically one of the states that's having a lot of trouble with water, and they're taking their technologies to California. So here's an example of how Canada can lead in a brand new sector like water technologies. And in fact, one of the things that we are working on from an advocacy perspective that will impact your industry is that we're advocating that water is part of the national security strategy, and this current government does agree with that. So over the next few years, we're going to keep working with different industries, including the Department of Defense, to start valuing our water as a national security asset, which will probably change the way we all work, but in a good way, and will protect our sovereignty. We can go to the next slide. And finally, that's it. That's my last slide. And we are formally announcing these wonderful water impact reports at WEFTEC. And if any of you will be in WEFTEC in Chicago at the end of September, I'd be lovely to meet you. So with that, Lorena, I think we can dive right into our questions and open it up to our audience.
That's excellent. Thank you very much, Soula. That was a great presentation. There's so many aspects to this that I have questions on. I'm just going to put my video back on here. Thank you. So, I'd like to, before I dive into the questions that I prepared a little earlier, I do want to ask you, you said during the presentation that one of the ways you bring these products and innovations to market is through the public works departments. Can you explain a little bit about how that process works for potential innovators out there?
Yeah, absolutely. It's probably the hardest industry to crack because there's a lot of risk averseness in municipalities and public works, and so nobody wants anybody touching the water. But what we found is that there's a lot of and a growing amount of industries and municipalities and hydro companies that are willing to test things. In fact, some of them have created external test beds for water, but a lot of them are allowing us to go in and do small scale studies. And that's because these technologies, before we take them there, they're de-risked, Lorena.
Hmm.
And we also hire members of the public works organizations who come and act as our fractional CEOs and fractional coaches for these companies. So what they do is they're working directly with people from public works and municipalities, understanding what the issues are and bringing their technologies to respond to a challenge that municipality or public works company is having. And so just by opening up the doors, doing small scale pilots, as soon as that pilot works, it is actually engaged. And once one organization, adopts it, every other organization across Canada wants it. So we found a formula where we're working with the public works companies. We're not saying, hey, we've got the answer. We're saying, here's a solution to this particular problem. Let us test it on a small scale. And we're finding ways to get them in there. And that's where we were able to multiply the number of pilots exponentially. But it needs people on the inside. So I would encourage that if anybody's interested on the webinar who wants to be a mentor to some of these folks, please give us a call because we can use your help to accelerate this because this is how we're getting impact and great results.
That's amazing. Amazing. Thank you. And another thing you mentioned was the blue bonds concept. Can you describe that a little bit more?
Yes, probably not as deeply as you'd like me to right now, only because it's in its nascent stage. But the idea is that, the green bonds that were originally produced in Canada were hugely successful. They created a lot of capital for clean tech in Canada. And so the banks right now are looking at the next best thing. And one of the things that they're actually jumping on is these water technologies and water. So how can we manage water? How can we better harness it. And so in that thinking, as we came up with these water impact reports and basically the first water standard, I would say, that exists out there, they're starting to have conversations around, well, maybe there's something here for us to create. And so we are meeting with some financial institutions at the moment, but I can say there's a lot of excitement around that in the industry right now. And I think we're going to be hearing a lot more about it. It's still gelling for them on how they can do something equivalent, but they see this as a big winner for Canada moving forward. So I'll have more maybe on our next webinar.
Excellent. Excellent. So before we dive into some of the other questions, I have a question from the audience.
Sure.
She asks if would it be possible to translate the number of Olympic-sized pools to MLD? This would help convey the benefit for utilities.
MLD. What does that mean? Sorry.
I think that's probably millions of liters a day.
Oh, sure. Just a moment, please. So basically, one Olympic-sized pool of water is 125 million liters, meters cubed. Is that what you're talking about? It's
I
meters.
think that's what
So
it
we're
is.
talking about meters cubed, right? And so basically, we are talking about 95 billion meters cubed uh, of water is what we're talking about. Does that answer the question?
I believe so. Yes, thank you. That's very,
Okay.
very significant, obviously.
Yes.
So, excellent. Now, one of the other things I wanted to ask you about is the innovation that you've been seeing obviously crosses a number of industries, and all of them are important. I don't want to diminish any of them, but we are in the hydropower industry. So I was just curious, do you see any innovations or have you seen innovations in your portfolio so far that could happen in our space that could impact some of what of our membership is looking at?
Yeah, absolutely. We're seeing innovators that are addressing some of the very challenges that actually hydro faces. First of all, there's the AI-based forecasting tools that predict water flows weeks in advance, filtration systems that tackle sedimentation, and this is actually a major hidden cost for hydro that we don't necessarily always talk about, and biosolutions that reduce algae growth, I should say, in reservoirs. One of our startups is working on AI platforms for real-time water allocation using quantum, for example, initially designed for the Columbia Basin, which could be directly applied to dam operations. So these kind of solutions strengthen both energy reliability and environmental stewardship. But I have some real examples, if you mind. I can just pull a few out here.
Sure.
One company, for example, is Clean Nature. So what they do is they reduce the ecological impact of road salt by monitoring and optimizing its use. So what's the connection to hydropower? Salt runoff affects freshwater systems and reservoirs. So by integrating Clean Nature's data and AI tools, the operators that have adopted this could better track the upstream salt impacts that alter conductivity
Mm.
and aquatic life near the hydro facilities. And that's a big deal. And a second company called EMO3 uses modular ozonation technology for water treatment. And we're doing a lot of piloting of this in aquariums and municipalities. But the connection to hydropower here is that their technology, coupled with smart monitoring, helps mitigate water quality issues downstream of reservoirs. So we have the upstream and now we have the downstream. So algae and contaminants. And this enhances community and ecological trust. So a lot of these technologies really do relate to hydro. So those are just two that I just gave you.
That's excellent. Excellent. So, and I think as companies become more aware of this opportunity, I would hope to see more people move into your space. We have a Dragons Dam competition that we're launching at this year's conference in October, which is a competition between different engineering schools to come up with an innovation that will impact our industry. So I see a real natural link between what we're doing here with this competition. The winner will be chosen during the conference that we have this October, between October 1st and 3rd here in Ottawa. And it's an exciting new component to the work that we do, which I think it links really well into what you're doing, which is to take these things up to the next phase. So that's
Oh,
really, really exciting.
I love it. I mean, I think this is just fabulous. This is a perfect example of as we go, for example, our next competition is the big binational competition that we're doing. February 2026 is launching. So that's the competition that's running across the 8 states and 2 provinces. And we have the governors and premiers as our co-hosts, as well as the 360 mayors around the Great Lakes, Quebec, and Canada are co-hosting this. So they're defining the issues that we want to solve. And one of those issues is energy. So I think that this could be a first launch. Let's bring them into that big competition across North America. But I also see it as a perfect stepping stone for what I'm calling the aftercare. So once they have a great idea, they come out of your competition, we can help take them, validate it, and take it to market through the Aqua Entrepreneur Program across Canada. So imagine your Dragons Den winners going on to a pilot with real utilities, raise capital, and hire staff. That's a big win for us here in Canada. So I'd love to work with you.
Absolutely. I think we'd love to work together on that. That would be an excellent opportunity for sure. Um,
Absolutely.
and with your eco literacy program, how can we help you with that? Because I think that's a really important aspect to energy in general. A lot of Canadians and people everywhere don't understand a lot of the intricacies to energy and energy production. And getting that information to students when they're more easily taught is an important component to trying to increase the energy literacy across the country. And obviously, eco literacy that involves water is an important factor there. So how can we help support you with
Yeah.
those?
It's a great question, and I was hoping you'd ask that. I'd say for a start, this is a perfect opportunity for us to integrate the hydroelectricity and the work that's been done there into this program to really make it lack of a better word, sexy, right? Fun, interesting for children as young as kindergarten. So I'd say support us. You can become a national education sponsor with us. And we've got the Canada Water Agency, we've got the Royal Canadian Geographic Society, we've got the Government of Canada really funding this and putting good dollars behind it because we recognize that we have not done enough work to educate the public. So imagine now we can show them what work looks like, for example, in the public sector and the public works, and then have them become aspire to that. And I don't know how much you know about the Canadian Geographic Society, but they've created these massive maps of all our watersheds across Canada. And the idea is they're using augmented reality. We'll be able to tell stories of the work that is being done, for example, not just in hydroelectricity, but really across any water-related market. And so our goal is to actually raise that, and I would say join us. I mean, join us, and we'd love to spotlight members of your association who work in these industries to really talk about what it is and what it means to impact something as beautiful as our water.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you for that. And I then jumping from primary school to something that's a little bit more sophisticated and is taking up a lot of space right now is the AI developments and what we're seeing there. And I know you touched on a little bit of that in your presentation. We are impacted with AI from for a couple of reasons. One, obviously, is the tremendous amount of energy that's required in order to provide sufficient energy for these facilities. So there's an increased energy requirement that comes with AI that all of us are struggling to address. I think hydro is a very natural fit for a lot of that because we are so dispatchable, and we're reliable base load under normal conditions. And so there's that piece to it. And I know that a lot of utilities are trying to determine how they can bring those things into their grids without disrupting what's already there. But on the other side of the equation, I think is where your innovators are, which is how can you actually apply the AI to predict the water flows? And I think we've looked at potentially determining the number of fish that might be impacted by a facility through AI. Can you just maybe briefly tell us what sorts of innovators you're seeing in that space so far? And is this increasing? Is this something that we should be looking to your organization for as we start thinking about potential solutions for problems?
Absolutely. I would say that it's probably the first thing that came up when we talked about launching our big binational. Like, what do we do about data centers and the incredible use of water? Because there's many problems with it. We're seeing a lot of states and provinces right now bringing in a lot of these cloud farms, but they're not really necessarily looking at how it's impacting, areas that basically barely have any water. And some of these AI data farms use as much as one city's worth of water.
Yeah.
And so we are going to be hacking that solution. And we are looking at things like smarter and more adaptive operation of hydropower facilities. So that's one, right? There's one we can look at how can we use that power more efficiently that can result in this unprecedented optimization of water resources and energy production. So on one side, we have innovators that are looking at that and are trying to figure out how do we can create more with less, more energy with less. But on the other side, we also have to look at, are there other ways to power that? Are there ways we can optimize the water we are using in those data centers? For example, we don't necessarily treat it when it goes through the data center, and that's also a big problem. How can we return it, for example, to the basin so that we can use it for energy? So I think that this year is going to be the year that we're going to see a lot more of these technologies emerge because this is one of the biggest trends we're seeing. And I know we had talked a little bit about trends, Lorena, but the biggest trends is how can we use AI and grow because that train has left the station,
Yeah.
but we also know what kind of a negative impact it's having on water and our energy. So we're going to put a lot of focus next year. And I would say that, yeah, I think we're going, if we can work together in this particular challenge section, I think we're going to find that a lot of new technologies are going to emerge. And if we can find ways to pilot them quickly, I think we'll be able to get to those solutions quickly. But there's no one answer right now. But there is now a big push to solve this. I agree with you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is a space that we could actually leapfrog into as a country and take the lead on in a number of aspects. So I'm
We
really
should.
encouraged. Yeah,
We
really
should.
encouraged by that. I'm seeing another question come in. It says, so this is from Thomas Graddick. He says, this year we're seeing more municipalities struggling with potable water supply because of climate change. Canadian municipalities can achieve securing water supply in the same fashion as Eau de Paris, which is buying conserved water credits from farmers up to 150 kilometers away from Paris, which impact the catchment basin. Can AquaAction put this example in front of the provincial and federal government to secure water for future generations? Is that something that you would look at doing, or do you need a proponent to come to you with this?
We're already doing that. I
Okay.
mean, on an advocacy level, these are examples. And did you say Thomas Graddick? I know Thomas. I used to
Yeah.
say Thomas. Yeah. So definitely, he's bringing up a big point. We are bringing a lot of these examples to the government right now, and I think for the first time, our government is listening. I don't think that they ever saw water as anything more than abundant in Canada, but because now it's become a geopolitical issue, there's a bigger appetite to discuss these things. And to how do we protect our water? And Lorena, one of the things that we're seeing that is really scary to me is that we're seeing some corporations already planning ahead and starting to buy up lands that have groundwater, right? Because groundwater is not yet regulated. And why are
Mhm.
they buying up lands for groundwater? Because they want to control it. And the other day, there was somebody that came out here in Quebec that said we should create luxury water testing bars, just like we have alcohol bars. And to me, that's the scariest thing ever because water's a public human right. Water should not be sold. And so I think we have a big opportunity right now to change that with our government, and we're advocating every day. So I urge anybody who wants to come and join us on that level too. I'd love to have a discussion with you. What else can we bring in front of our government as we continue to advocate for all of these issues?
I think that's one of the big challenges to government is keeping ahead of some of these trends. It's very difficult,
It
yeah,
is.
country to stay in front of these things, especially when it's something that isn't front of mind because people aren't necessarily living it every day.
Yeah.
It can be particularly challenging.
It's the first time, though, our government or the current government mentioned water in their victory speech, and water is a national security asset. So I think there's a political will right now to go there.
Yes, I think you're right. I think this is a very good time to bring these things forward. One thing you mentioned was that Edmonton doesn't have enough groundwater for new development.
Right.
That was something I had not heard of. I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah.
Where are you seeing most of your applications from? Is there a regional aspect to your proponents, or are they coming in from all the way across the country?
They're coming in from all over, but we're seeing an increase in regions that are running out of water, and having water insecurity. In fact, we're busing water from the United States and some parts of Canada, especially Alberta. So when there's not enough groundwater, which is our security to actually, feed these new structures that we're trying to build, we have to find them from elsewhere. We're seeing that more acutely in areas like Arizona. So we have the twofold. We have on the East Coast, it's all about flooding and treatment of water and managing the overruns and stormwater. On the West Coast, it's more agriculture related and biodiversity related. And how do we manage the water we have? Like, for example, some of the applications we're looking at, Lorena, because of this, is that can we give operators tools so when there is a big fire like a Jasper, can they not divert all the water to Jasper, and can they divert just enough to keep the businesses running while treating, the fire? I mean, those are quantum issues that we're trying to solve so that we can manage that water better, so that we just don't do an all or nothing and hurt, our economy and our ability to build new businesses and new housing. So there's a lot of work being done, but part of it is a management issue. But two parts of Canada have two different issues that we see coming depending on where they're living.
And do you see a significant, I would expect, divide between those innovations that are coming across to resolve an urban issue versus those that are more in the forest areas? Is that I would imagine there's quite a diversion between the two.
mostly in the urban areas now. So
Yeah.
it's actually moved from the forest to the urban areas quite a bit because right now we're seeing so many disasters, right? You can't separate our water security from the flooding and the fires that are happening across Canada. And most of those are being felt right in urban centers right now. So we're seeing a big shift towards that.
That's very interesting.
Yeah.
And then I also wanted to ask you a little bit about the water standard and Oxia.
Mhm.
Have you seen a push towards this sort of measurement in other countries? Are there other organizations that are also following this, or are we really just at the seed stage here in Canada for seeing this sort of initiative?
I think what you're seeing is the beginning of something that doesn't exist that's being launched right here in Canada. There's nobody doing this. There's organizations that are doing a measurement of quality of water primarily, but nobody's actually taken the time to create something to measure the water saved. And we feel that we're sitting on something pretty incredible right now. The ECCC has also taken notice of this and sees this as possibly something that could become a standard in Canada. So there's a lot of conversations and excited corners that are happening, financial district, government right now with this. And so with Emmanuel, who's on here with me, we feel we're sitting on something that's uniquely a Canadian homegrown invention that we're going to see spread all over the globe if we're lucky. But as drought gets worse, I think this becomes an incredible tool right now because we got to do more with less. We've just got to do more with less. And I think this is the tool that we're going to launch to do that.
That's amazing. Thank you. And we're getting close to closing time. But I did want to ask you before we close, as you look towards the future, I can feel you're very committed to this initiative and to the great work that your organization is doing. What are some of the potential solution pathways that you think that we should be pursuing? Where are the avenues where you see the biggest opportunities for innovation and perhaps to make the biggest impact as we look to the future?
Yeah. Well, it's a dual-edged sword, but AI has to be part of that solution. So AI and digital tools that help us predict and prevent water risk are important. Of course, nature-based solutions that restore ecosystems, but I would also say circular approaches to water use. So a circular economy more than a linear economy, where we can start figuring out ways to reuse a lot of what we use up so that we don't just throw it back and, as garbage into our waters, but we actually restore it. And I'll give you an example. One of our companies is taking algae and turning it into biomass. And we want that to become a new source of energy down the line. So that's an example of a circular economy innovation. So I think that. And finally, I do want to say that the standardized measurement and finance, like these water impact reports and future credit markets, will hopefully unlock investment at scale to help us fund a lot of these innovations and let Canada take the lead. Because Canada should take the lead, and we're going to be doing our best to make that happen.
Amazing. Well, thank you very much, Sula, for this. We look forward to seeing you at the conference in October.
Mhm.
And I would encourage everyone who's watching today to have a look at our registration page and sign up for the conference from October 1st to 3rd. And with that, I think we'll close.
Thank
Thank
you,
you very
Lorena.
much.
Thank you, everybody. And hopefully, if you have any questions, I'd love to speak to you and meet you in October.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.